So good morning and a very warm welcome to UCL. I'm Mike Davies, Director of the UCL Institute for Environmental Design and Engineering, IEDE. And I'm delighted that IEDE hosting this event and that we've managed to combine our celebration of 50 years of environmental design and engineering at the Bartlett with the final event in the Zero Carbon Hub and Innovate UK Performance Gap series. Many thanks also to Saint-Gobain for their sponsorship of the event. So before we start, just some housekeeping. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, so if you do hear one, please treat it as real. Make your way up through the exits and up through the stairs into Gower Street or the South Quadrangle. If you haven't found the facilities yet, they're just in the foyer area. And if you require any CPD certificates, please see either me or the members of staff, and we'll be delighted to try and sort that out for you. So part of today is celebrating 50 years of environmental design and engineering at the Bartlett. So I thought I'd just have a very quick run through the last 50 years before I give my very brief talk this morning. The timeline goes back to the start of the 60s with the appointment of Richard Llewellyn-Davies to the Bartlett. This was followed a few years later by the appointment of Ralph Hopkinson as the first chair in environmental design and engineering. The MSc in environmental design and engineering was launched in 1978 and the MSc in light and lighting in 1987. Pat O'Sullivan was appointed as the Hayden Pilkington Professor of EDE in 1989, and in 1992, the MSc in Facility and Environment Management was launched. In the same year, the Bartlett School of Graduate Studies was formed, and you might recognize a couple of faces on the screen there who are here today and played key roles in the Bartlett School of Graduate Studies. Professor May Kassar, who's now Director of the UCL Institute for Sustainable Heritage, and Tadja Restian, who established the UCL Energy Institute. And so to the present. In 2014, we established the UCL Institute for Environmental Design and Engineering, which now sits with the other institutes that comprise the Bartlett School of Environment, Energy and Resources. And we're all together in one building in Central House, just a few minutes walk away from here. So what do we do at IEDE? Well, we have a very clear focus on buildings and the urban environment. We have an approach based on disciplinary excellence in, for example, the areas of building physics, modelling and monitoring of building performance, issues of health, human well-being, productivity, energy use, and climate change issues relating to both mitigation and adaptation. We also combine this disciplinary excellence with a cross-disciplinary approach. And such cross-disciplinary interaction, bringing together varied disciplinary expertise and different theoretical perspectives, is, we think, essential. So we're pursuing a deeper understanding of the part played by choices relating to buildings and the urban environment and engaging with the major issues of our time. And our work cuts across the 4 UCL grand challenges of sustainable cities, global health, human well-being, and intercultural interaction. In this very brief introduction, I'm going to say just a few words about our view on the total performance of buildings and how we are responding to the associated challenges. So what do we mean by the performance of buildings? Do we mean their energy performance? Well, yes, but of course we also mean a much wider performance. For example, the adaptation of the building to climate change, the mental and emotional well-being of the occupants of the building, the physical well-being and the health of the occupants, productivity, and what about wider issues such as the broader sustainability issues, housing affordability, for example, community social cohesion. Well, all of these things are important. But how are our buildings actually performing? Even if we just take one issue, energy, for example, are buildings actually achieving their energy performance targets? Well, we'll hear more about that as we go through the course of today. But even if they are achieving their energy targets, can they do this whilst achieving their indoor environmental quality targets, for example, at the same time? Energy demand reduction alone is worthless unless it allows buildings to be healthy, comfortable and productive places to live and work in. So here's an example of a simple but useful, I think, performance-related question. Is it possible to both reduce the energy demand of our building stocks and still achieve good indoor environmental quality? And it's this particular question that we're addressing in a new joint project with China that's just started. This project is called the Total Performance of Low-Carbon Buildings in China and the UK, or TOP, and it's a project funded by EPSRC and the Chinese equivalent, NSFC. And it's a collaboration between Tsinghua University in Beijing, in China, and ourselves in University College in the UK. We think this work's essential. For example, recent work demonstrates the potential for very significant health impacts of household energy efficiency measures due to changes in indoor environmental quality. And another recent study suggests that indoor air quality can influence office productivity by around 10%. Hugely important given that staff costs typically account for up to 90% of business operating costs. So a substantial part of that work in that project will deploy building physics approaches of the monitoring and modelling of a range of low energy buildings in both the UK and China, in order to move towards a robust process for the real-time identification of building underperformance. But we also have a major part of the project devoted to systems thinking. Well, what is this? Why are we doing this? And what does it actually mean? So I'd like to just look very briefly at what made us think this is such an important component of this project by considering an example of some relevant work at IEDE, the HUE project. So the Housing, Energy and Wellbeing project, the context for this work is the required stock transformation in the housing stock that needs to take place to meet these very challenging carbon emission reduction targets. As around about a quarter of UK energy is consumed in dwellings, it's an important target for such carbon emission reductions. And given that a very high percentage of these buildings are likely to still be standing in the 2050s, it puts a great emphasis on retrofitting, low energy retrofits. And you may have seen this rather startling figure before. The implication is that one home needs to be fully retrofitted every minute. But in attempting to undertake this radical transformation of millions of dwellings, we must pay attention to the possible unintended consequences of doing so. As part of our EPSRC-funded platform grant, another project, this work was undertaken and uncovered over 100 relevant unintended consequences of policies to improve the energy efficiency of the UK housing stock. So it became clear then that we needed to have a rather more formalised approach to this complex problem. Such complex systems have emergent properties, behaviour that you couldn't predict from knowledge of the individual components of the system. Only when they come together to form the system do they have these unexpected emergent properties. And so we turn to the field of systems thinking and system dynamics, the principles of which have been around for some time, of course, and have been applied to other sectors and problems, but we believe there's an important opportunity here for built environment performance. So how should we proceed? In the HUE project then, we used participatory system dynamics modelling in conjunction with this large team of stakeholders, we're very grateful to them, to develop a qualitative causal theory linking housing, energy and well-being. And my colleague in this initial part of the work, Alex Macmillan, interviewed these stakeholders and asked them simply about what they understood to be the links between housing, energy and well-being. Each interview then resulted in a cognitive map, and we were then able to assemble a combined map that wasn't in any one single person's head, and new connections thus emerged. We then held workshops to further develop those maps. Putting the interviews together, we came up with what represented our current combined in-practice understanding of the system. So this here then is the primary objective of such policies that attempt to reduce the energy demand and emissions of the housing stock. But the work with the stakeholders revealed, of course, that there are very important interconnections with other themes such as these. So I've already mentioned indoor air quality, also other themes, household crowding, housing affordability, community connection, land ownership, etc. And we believe this mapping is vital for understanding the impacts of the connections and the likely success of the primary objective of such policies, but also in understanding possible unintended consequences and these other things. So we superimposed on this a much more detailed map, which you're not intended to read, it's impossible to read. The intention of showing this really is just to show these rather complex set of interconnections between those different things. It provides a very detailed set of interconnections that, if you're not aware of, may lead to problems or indeed actually missed opportunities. You'd be forgiven for thinking, of course, that surely this looks far too complicated to do anything sensible or quantitative with. But let's look at the example we undertook for the Green Deal. I think we've shown that some useful simulation can be done in simply trying to understand, for example, just the likely success of the primary objective. I think it would be true to say that the take-up figures of the Green Deal were disappointing. I'm sure you're aware that the Green Deal was the government's flagship energy retrofit initiative, and it didn't quite work out as planned. So why was there such a poor take-up? So we had a look at that using these causal maps and quantitative modelling that we undertook here. So this rather simple graph here is showing the desired number of Green Deal interventions in green, and this is several millions. And unfortunately, the blue line represents the actual number of implementations, a much smaller number, running along the bottom here. So something didn't quite work out as planned. Well, why might it be? Well, the Green Deal was really predicated on a very rational financial decision-making process in households. So Nikki Zimmerman from IEDE built a quantitative system dynamics model using aspects of the causal maps to test that assumption. And again, it's impossible to read this, but this is the model that Nikki built using those caudal maps. So this is a system dynamics model, now a quantitative model, a simulation model. And the green parts of this represent the parts of the system which relate to that, the basis on which the Green Deal was predicated, the financial, rational decision-making part. These other parts start to introduce other parts of the system that the stakeholders reveal to us. And then if you run that model, you get something like this. So using only the green original assumptions, you can produce an output from the model which somewhat replicates this intended uptake of the number of Green Deal implementations. But when you start to introduce other parts of the model, and they're rather more complex and different connections in the system, the way people are likely to behave, you can run a series of simulations which gradually reduce the predictions down to the actual number of implementations that was achieved in practice. Of course, such a model can never be perfect, and I'm certainly not presenting it as a perfect model. I'm showing it here simply to demonstrate that by incorporating wider aspects from the wider system, it may be possible to construct useful models of such policies which are better placed to understand reality. And this type of work with Nikki and a growing team is continuing here at IEDE. So in conclusion, just this initial part, there are two major related bodies of work that I believe are required to address the total performance gap. Research to support the development of relevant building assessment methods, technologies and tools, but also vitally, research to support the development of relevant policy and regulations in order to effectively implement such tools. So that's exactly what we're doing in the new TOP project with China, in the particular area of energy and indoor environmental quality. However, we're also doing more. For example, continuing on the theme of a cross-disciplinary and systems-based approach, IEDE has taken the lead in setting up the new UK Centre for Moisture in Buildings. And we plan to formally launch the centre in mid-2016. Neil May, who many of you know, I think, has been leading on this, and as well as establishing a core team of centre partners, we've established a great advisory group. We had a very positive meeting of that a couple of weeks ago. So the core partners are IEDE, UCL CEGE, that's Civil, Environmental and Geomatic Engineering, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, the Building Research Establishment, and Heriot-Watt University. So moisture in buildings is another example of a very complex system. And we have, I suppose, the very ambitious or impossible aim of moving towards the development of a moisture-safe built environment in the UK, but in doing so, hoping to substantially improve the way moisture risk is understood and managed in the UK. So we hope to do this via the establishment of this independent centre with national and international expertise linking research, government, finance, industry and building owners and occupiers. Why do we think it's so important now? Well, moisture-related risks appear to be increasing, but there's huge uncertainty about the causes and effects. There are increasing concerns at all levels due to effects of flooding, retrofit and new build. And we believe that research in this area needs to catch up from years of inattention. Other examples of IEDE initiatives relate to our belief that the integration of research and education is essential. Hence, to complement our existing master's programs, we're developing other courses, and the two that we'll start first are one master's course and one undergraduate course. So we're planning this new MSc, which should start in 2017-18, the MSc in Health, Wellbeing and Sustainable Buildings. And Marcella Ucci, who's been leading on the development of this, will say a few words about this later on today, so I won't say any more at the moment. We're also planning a new MEng, which will also start at the same time. This is an MEng program in engineering and architectural design, and it unites 3 of the university's departments in what we hope will be a pioneering academic partnership comprising the Bartlett School of Architecture, ourselves, and the Department of Civil, Environmental and Geomatic Engineering. And this new program is aimed at creating a novel interdisciplinary workforce and network of creative professionals, each with complementary knowledge and skill in both engineering and architectural design, who are better equipped to exploit the opportunities afforded by new technologies and methods. And Dan Momovich will say a little bit more about the course later today. The program will be based in new facilities at Here East, at the Olympic Park, and Here East will house a sequence of multifunctional, adaptable, large-scale spaces. The scale and novelty of the scheme, we believe, will enable us to pursue new and exciting projects to strengthen interdisciplinary research and teaching. And this move is in advance of the opening of the new major UCL campus, UCL East, which will take place in the same area in 2019. So, in summary, IEDE is very much engaged with the total performance of buildings, addressing a very wide range of performance criteria, and we have a body of related new initiatives underway, which I've run through briefly this morning. I'm very pleased that we've got such a relevant and exciting programme lined up for you today. I'd like to end by just again welcoming you to UCL, and I'm sure you'll have a very interesting and enjoyable day. So thank you very much for your attention. So I'll now hand over to our speakers for this first session. We'll take questions from the speakers at the end of each part of the sessions, so you'll have an opportunity to raise any points that you wish to at that point. So now over to Simon Hart from Innovate UK, who will speak about the Building Performance Evaluation Programme.
Thanks, Mike. Morning. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, a few nods. Okay. I'm a little bit croaky this morning, so hopefully my voice is going to last until the end of the session. Okay, so first of all, just quickly like to know, how many of you have heard of Innovate UK? Oh, that's pretty good. Okay. I did this to an audience full of civil servants about 2 months ago, about 3 of them in the same room, which is quite surprising. Okay, so if you've heard of Innovate UK, how many of you heard of the Building Performance Evaluation Programme? That's really good. Okay, and how many of you came to the hackathon last weekend? Oh, right. Brilliant. Okay, good. Hopefully we'll have some more of you next time. Okay, so Innovate UK, as you probably know, we're the UK Innovation Agency. So we are funded out of Department of Business, Innovation and Skills. And our remit is to fund, support and connect innovative businesses. And we do that for the benefit of the UK economy. So we fund businesses to succeed, to pay more tax, to employ more people. That's the return on investment we get. This is Ruth. Ruth is our new CEO, joined us last year. And Ruth has put in place a new strategy for Innovate UK, which is, differs from where we used to go. I think the focus that we're moving to now is very much more on small, high growth and high potential growth SMEs, and looking to accelerate them into future markets. So if you're a startup, if you're thinking of creating a startup, scale-ups and small SMEs, that's the sort of place where we want to help. That's where the best benefit to the UK economy comes from. And what we do, so as well as supporting and nurturing those firms, we're also looking to support innovation excellence within certain locations, so certain regions, so where there is a centre of expertise around a particular theme or a particular industry. That's also where we will act. So as a good example of that is the aerospace industry in Bristol, automotive in the Midlands. We're looking to develop catapults. So the catapult centres are independent centres of excellence. Anyone can go and access them. They are there for you. They provide access to skills, to equipment, to overseas opportunities. They're centres of excellence. There are a growing number of them around the country. In London, you've got already you have the Future Cities catapult that's quite relevant to this work, and also the digital catapult that we'll talk a little bit about later. We also work across research and government. So I spend a lot of my time dealing with various departments and trying to unify some of the thinking towards innovation and towards the built environment. Working also across research, so hence coming to UCL and some of the fantastic work they do here. And we're also looking to evolve our funding models. So traditionally, you'd come to Innovate UK and you'd potentially receive some grant funding to go and take your idea forward or to take your business forward. We're actually looking to evolve that a little bit more. So the types and values and methods that we fund or engage with your business are evolving. I can't say much more about it at the moment because a lot of this is under development, but we will shortly announce some more information on that, probably towards the summer, as to where we're going. So UK R&D spending, well, that's the graph that says it all. Research councils get about 2.7 billion from government. UK business puts in about 17 billion towards R&D, and we sit in the middle there. So we try and take all that fantastic research and turn it into fantastic business. So with that little bridge there, so you might better notice there's a small issue in the height of that graph. There's a consultation now at the moment on the merger of Innovate UK with the research councils. If you'd like to share your views with them, that's the web address. You can probably find it just through Google, but that's the web address. If you'd like to go and share your views on that. It's an open consultation at the moment. And really what we do, we bridge that gap in the middle around the technology readiness levels. So we're sort of working in the middle there. We're not at the upfront research side, And we're not at the late stage, mass rollout, mass product development, ramp up manufacturing. We don't do that. We're in the middle bit. We're helping businesses to succeed. So the Building Performance Evaluation Program, that's what we're here to talk about today. This was one of the largest projects undertaken by the built environment team. It built on the excellence that came out of a previous program called Retrofit for the Future, and on top of a number of other programs that took place in the UK, such as the probe studies. Retrofit for the Future obviously was a retrofit program, but BPE was a new build, so specifically new build. And this is the original form from 2010 that was used to sign off the program. And the main part of it there is that there's a lack of reliable evidence of performance of buildings. And the program was put together in a different method to previous programs. This was not funding innovation directly. The problem here is that the information didn't exist. So what we were doing was actually going out and measuring and defining what the problem was. It was £8 million of funding between 2010 and 2014, and it funded 105 programs. So it's 105 building projects, construction projects. And some of those could have consisted of many, many buildings. So some of them, one could be a single building, an office block, another could be a block of apartments. And we took them right the way from early stage concept, right the way through to 2 years post-occupancy, and measured everything. That's the first time that's ever been done on that scale. It was about a 50-50 split between domestic and non-domestic buildings. So depending on the subject that you're interested in, there was an enormous amount of value in both sets of data and both sets of information. Obviously, different methods were used to measure different types of buildings, but all the information is there and available. And what we're looking to do here is, with building performance evaluation, there is such a huge amount of value in the data that it's very, very difficult to convey that in normal ways of writing reports. It doesn't really do it justice. It's almost got a life of its own now because so many people are involved in this program, bringing it into the stage it's at now. It's created a huge amount of value for the industry. And actually, if you were to go and delve right into this, you could probably come up with a business model there and then. You could probably go and find a way to rapidly accelerate your business into delivering or solving some of the challenges that came out of this program. So domestic, 53 projects, which is about 350 homes. Non-domestic, 48 projects, which is 55 buildings. Very even spread across the country through population centres. The project would not have succeeded if it wasn't for the dedicated team of evaluators. We've got some evaluators here, by the way. Put your hands up if you've got any evaluators. I'm looking at one, Carl Richard, thank you. There's one. So really fantastic group of people. The evaluators essentially project managed and stewarded so many of these programs through across that 5-year period. And there were some really difficult challenges with some of these projects. Some of the things that were found, some of the expertise that was needed to make these things happen, they are so dedicated. You put them in a room together and you can just see that the ideas spinning off. It's absolutely fantastic. A really great group, and they've helped contribute to the success of the program. So what did we gain? What did we measure? Well, if you're interested in domestic, there is a huge amount of data, literally data, stored in the embed platform. There is a whole dedicated project page set up on the KTN website. We have Carbon Buzz, which has stored all the non-domestic data, the bus methodology, which from Arup, CIBSE TM22. We actually contributed to part of the updating of that standard as well. Plus, we also have a huge amount of data, and that looks a little bit like that. So that's some of it. It's about 33,000 files, 27 gigabytes. It looks like that if you look at it in Explorer. So every single one of those is a folder full of project data. And every single one of those folders is 7 or 8 sub-levels deep. This turned into a big data challenge. And this was something that we weren't expecting. So when this project kicked off in 2010, there were very good intentions to gather the data, and that's exactly what they did. But the challenge came, what do we do with it? Innovate UK has previously done programs such as Design for Future Climate, which generated, again, a huge amount of information, lots and lots of interest. You publish some reports, you get some books written, and then after a while, everything tails off. And we didn't want to do that with this, because we saw a unique opportunity here to do something bigger and better with it. There are reports available, of course. There's 2 reports. They were published a week ago on Friday, so you can go and get these from that web address. If you want any of these links, by the way, I've got a Twitter account. I'll show the thing at the end. Just search for me. I put them all out on Twitter about an hour and a half ago, so you can find all the links from there. There's 2 fantastic reports. There's 2 summaries to these reports as well. So if you can't bother to read the full report, there's a 2-page summary for each of these as well. So you can go away and sound like an expert like me. So go and read the reports, go and find those. There's also a social housing study delivered by NEF, that's that one down there, that looks at the social housing projects contained in building performance evaluation. And later on today, we've got some speakers who are going to talk about more about building performance evaluation, some of the projects and some of the specifics. So what else did we do? Well, about 12 months ago, Matt Colmer, who's in the front row here and is going to be talking later, we sat down together in the basement of a building over in Old Street, trying to figure out how we're going to wrap this program up and not repeat mistakes of the past in the way things have been reported. So we want to make sure this program lives on as a legacy. It's there as a data set that people can access, but also as something that people can build on. So you can keep using this and you can keep learning from it. And then it starts to gather pace and momentum of its own. So we will start to acquire more sets of information, signpost to more pieces of data. So what we did, we looked to see, okay, so what could we do with this? And the initial idea was to just create a website and put everything on it. And then we realized actually that's not going to work. So we tried that and it doesn't work. So we went around the loop of actually going out and talking to experts in the field about what can you do with this information. So what if we give you 100 reports, what can you actually do with it? And it turned out there are a number of technologies that we were completely unaware of to do with language processing, to do with cataloging, and to do with the way that actual sites can interact. It evolved actually into a discussion with the Digital Catapult. And those of you who are aware, Digital Catapult looks after the digital economy. It's an independent centre of excellence. You go there and you will meet some fantastic SMEs, companies, activities, all to do with the digital economy. And the great thing about it was that the ideas that they threw out this program were things that we'd never, ever seen before. So what we want to do is to be able to take this and turn it into something a lot more than what the original sum of parts went into the program. We've created with the Digital Catapult an ongoing program. It's a 3-year program to develop and explore this data. And the whole reason is that when Matt and I sat together, we looked to see, so what can we do with this? Where can we take it? And it was pretty clear that the digital economy is growing 1/3 faster than any other sector in the UK. So what a better place to put the best bit of knowledge about the built environment than into the hands of that part of the economy. Because what it does is it gives you access to all those digital innovators that you probably would not encounter. And on the other side, of course, many of those digital innovators were not aware of the built environment. They're actually not aware of the challenges, and yet they're developing products that are very, very applicable to the challenges we face in the built environment. So there's going to be a big presentation on this later this afternoon. That's what the site looks like. It's live now. We launched it a week ago last Friday at a big event, followed by a hackathon. That was the hackathon. I'm not going to tell you too much about it because I think Matt's going to cover that this afternoon. But the fantastic part about this is you take a group of people who did not know about the Building Performance Evaluation Programme and throw them at it, and in a weekend you've got a whole load of solutions to the performance gap in a weekend. So that's what you can do with hackathons. We're going to be running more of these events, and they're going to be running a greater series of activity around this programme to help you access some of those digital innovators and some of those digital technologies. If you want to find out more, buildingdataexchange.org.uk, that's the site, that's the Building Data Exchange, you can go and find that. The link just below is the Building Performance Evaluation website, the project site. I'd urge you to go and have a look at the project site as well. There are archives in there going back to 2010, some of the original presentations, and you can sort of see the attitudes and challenges that people were facing back in 2010. Hasn't changed that much. You've got some of the latest videos from the program. We're going to be exploring and showcasing some of these projects. There's case studies on there. There's links to all the other events and all the other activities. So I'd urge you to go and have a look at that as well and make the most of it. The program, as I mentioned, it's 3 years. It's got a 3-year to go from the Digital Catapult side. From the Innovate UK side, we're not going to be doing any more with it. We're going to be showcasing what we've done so far. So all the work that's gone on, we're going to be showcasing that for the next year. But we can't do anything else more with it. We don't have the budget to do that. So what we're looking to do is to make sure we connect as many innovative businesses to this information as possible, so that you can take that information forward. You can start growing business models off it. You can start developing products around it. And that's what we want to achieve. Okay, if you want to find me, that's my Twitter handle. Those 2 hashtags there as well, you can find lots of information about the 2 events we ran last Friday. Go and have a look, go and get involved, go and get registered on the site. My voice is about to go, so I'll wrap up there. Thank you, thanks.
Thank you very much, Simon. Next up, we've got Rob Pannell, Managing Director, Zero Carbon Hub, who's going to speak to us about the performance gap.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Simon. Yes, I'm Rob Pannell. I've been involved in the built environment for about 42 years. I really am that old. I want to just take you through some practical view of what is really going on in terms of building performance. And I'll just start off by explaining who we are. Because, I mean, has anyone not heard of us? Put it that way around this time, rather than who's heard of us. Most people have heard of us. Oh, that's encouraging. We focus mostly on new homes, and we're about facilitating the mainstream delivery of low and zero carbon homes across all the borders. When I say all borders, I mean not just the UK, but also overseas. And you heard Mike mention earlier this morning about the work in China, where we're supporting that project, and we're delighted to spend quite a bit of time abroad, actually working with presenting the excellence of the UK in many of the areas of low energy, low carbon buildings, which we're still seen to be the world leading experts in this area. I'm not sure this particular government has the same ambition as previous governments, but we'll see how long we last as the championing of that side of things. Although we focus on new homes, we were asked to get involved with the Green Deal. And I was asked if we would be keen to do so. And I went, well, I've heard of poison chalices before, but this is certainly one of them, and we declined to get involved, and we're very pleased that we did make that decision. Although we're very disappointed that it didn't work. The idea came from one of our directors of the Zero Carbon Hub, who said, okay, it was New Year's Eve. He rang me up and said, "I've got an idea, Rob," and it was a good idea, but I think government maybe misunderstands how to introduce some of these things into the industry. So we come from the other side of it, where we're more about actually understanding what government thinks. We do meet with ministers on a regular basis, and they get my views, and they're always blunt. I'm not shy. I say what I think. So the performance gap was one of them. I actually met Andrew Tunnell in 2009. He was the MP responsible for building regulations, and when the last government was formed, he actually volunteered to be a minister for building regulations. And one of the Conservative colleagues said, "Well, what are building regulations?" Which was an interesting comment. But my meeting with him was a one-to-one, and he said, "Builders can't get it right on site." And I said, "Well, government can't get it right at the beginning, so we got a problem." So the performance gap discussion with Andrew Tunnell started there, and we had a very interesting chat. And I wanted to put this slide up because I actually do believe we're all living in the past in terms of the performance gap. I don't think any of us really understand it. And I think government are way back. They're the mammoth. We're not far ahead in the Zero Carbon Hub. We still don't understand it. We've been on this subject for some years. And you see the complexity that Simon's explained in terms of the data. That's fantastic that we've managed to get away around the data and find out how we can learn from it. But we are so far behind. Where's Europe? Yeah, they're still way back. So we've got a mammoth task ahead of us. To take this forward. Let me just take you into some detail. So Andrew stood on myself at this chat, and I said, well, you ought to get some views of industry, because industry can solve this for you. Government can't solve the performance gap, but industry can. So he gave us the money, and he said, okay, so you're so clever at it, Rob, go ahead and sort it out. And we got a little bit of money, I think it was about £300,000 from government to solve it. We never promised to solve it, by the way. We did promise to investigate it and come up with some ideas. And we had 160 odd people from industry involved. When I rang up 10 of the chief execs of the top 10 house builders and said, would you like to sit on an industry executive committee to hear about the problems you are creating? And 5 of them wanted to be involved. 5 out of the 10 wanted to be involved in this committee, which is fantastic. The interesting thing was the chief execs of house builders are interested in 2 things, profit and risk. And it was the risk element of this that was the worry. I just mentioned Volkswagen quite early on today because I think it's relevant. Volkswagen, who's got a Volkswagen? Anyone got to volunteer to actually owning one of these things that pollutes the atmosphere? The truth is, we all know that they've lied to us. They've lied to government. The industry for the built environment, we have a performance gap. The only difference is we're lying to the public, but government knows about it, that we're lying, so that's quite an interesting sort of view of that. But we did have this group put together to try to actually look at some of the process, the concept and planning, some of the design issues, the tools, the procurement, the materials, the construction, the verification, testing, and those all important construction joint details, which are so important as we take buildings forward into low energy, low carbon buildings. We put these 160 people in a room and said, what do you think the problems are? We came up with a report, and everyone had their view of what the problems were. We also did a literature review, which was just look at the state of the industry. And the state of the industry, probably it's the wrong word to use, isn't it, the state of the industry. But what we're trying to understand is what normally goes on with organisations like the inspectorate, the NHBC, the LABC, the software providers with SAP and other tools, professional institutions, house builders and manufacturers, and that was quite revealing. We also had a look at some of the processes, some of the actual things that are supposed to happen but don't. So as-built SAPs just don't happen. I used to work for a major house builder, and we used to do as-built SAPs, and they were all exactly the same as the design SAPs because there was no reason they should be any different. But obviously they would be. But that was the belief of the top 3 house builder. I actually believed it would always be exactly the same as the design intent. Field trials. One of my favourite ones was the EST heat pump trials, which for the first time actually put it on the map that there was a difference between what it's designed to do and what it actually did in use. But then we had the fantastic amount of investment by government through the Innovate UK Building Performance Valuation project, which is really taking things a step further by saying, we are going to give you some money to find out what is really going on from front to back of the problem. And we built all this into our understanding as well. We also had some previous academic studies from Sanford Brook particularly, and others looking at what is going on. But my favourite one on this slide, actually, ladies and gentlemen, is the secret knowledge. When I spoke to a chief executive of an international manufacturer, he said to me, yeah, we know there's a performance gap. I said, well, what percentage do you think it is? I won't give you his name, almost did then actually. But I said, to what percentage do you think you're lying about this subject? He said, what about 20%? I went, 20% of your material. So you're saying it acts like 1, and you're actually saying it's 20% out before it actually gets built into the product you're actually manufacturing. He said, well, that's what we have to compete, Rob. We have to compete with the others that lie as well. So I thought, well, that's just a great story. What we actually went and did, we actually visited 21 sites, and we actually put a team out there of 6 people, and we went through everything. We went through the design, we went through the SAP calculations, we went actually through a number of units across in great depth, taking photographs, understanding what was going on. And we identified one heck of a lot of issues, and I'll take you through some of those. So we actually put a document out, and I think these are available if you go to the foyer later on, the truth behind those myths. So all those people came up with all the problems, and then we started to identify what really were problems and what really were not really sure about the problems. We came up with a simple 2x2, and it was how much evidence do we have against the impact on the performance gap? Now that was interesting, because one of my favorites was always when you actually work on a building site and you see the drawing and it identifies a particular material, and then you go into the building that's being built and you see a completely different material. And there's also issues as well with if you go and look at a specification for taping, does anyone actually know how to specify a particular tape? You go to the manufacturer and he tells you this is what you have to use, and you write it down and you put it on the drawing. Great. Then the contractor goes on the pound shop or 99p shop and buys the same duct tape that you use everywhere else, and it looks exactly the same as the specified tape on the drawing. But one lasts about 5 minutes, the other one lasts about 50 years. So we do have a real problem with trying to identify products. And one of my keen ones was, when you go on a building site, can you identify easily what was the design intent? And most of the time you can't. I'll give you one example. I built a block of flats 11 stories high. We had dense blocks for the party walls, and we had lightweight blocks for the external walls. When it rained, they all looked the same colour. So when the forklift used to go and get the blocks from the compound, he delivered them to the, and it's been raining, he delivered them to the bricklayers, and we built this block. It wasn't until the building dried out that we actually realised that we had the lightweight blocks on the party walls often, and then we had the heavyweight blocks on the external walls, but you actually couldn't tell when you were building it. So it's those sort of things that we tried to find some evidence for against the impact on the performance gap. And we actually came up with some very basic principles here, that there was a misunderstanding about the knowledge and skills of the industry. We think people know about this stuff, but they don't. We actually think people don't take responsibility for understanding it further as well, and people do not communicate. With those three critical things, we actually identified with our evidence report as well, that we would only tackle 15 issues, because we actually felt that more than 15 would be difficult to handle. We just said, let's try and do the ones with the most evidence that had the most impact on the performance gap. There were hundreds more, but we just took the first 15. And I'll just take you through some of these 15, because I think they're interesting. Anyone want to admit to being an architect today? We got one or two that want to admit to it. Okay, well, that's good to see. But we recognize that architects may go to work to do a good job, but often they don't. So we often saw some issues, and and I'll come up and cover some of those in a minute. Anyone want to admit to being a SAP assessor? Dare you? One or two are going to admit it. Okay. Interesting how people perform on SAP assessments. Most house builders pay about £25 for a SAP assessment. Well, you don't get much for 25 quid. You really don't. I'm not sure they sell those in the pound shop yet, but maybe they will do soon. Those are sort of examples that I'm going to take you through. Just a few on the design, and I'll take you through a few on the construction side. Just to remind you, Andrew Sunnell said, the problem lies on the building site. It doesn't lie anywhere else. He's an architect, as you may know, and he believed that profession was good, and I believe that's true as well. But I don't believe anyone goes to work to do a bad job. I actually believe whether it's an architect, or whether it's a SAP assessor, or whether it's a tradesman, they actually go to work to do a good job. I don't believe they go to work to do a bad job, but things go badly wrong. So do they have an understanding and knowledge within the design team, first of all? Well, unfortunately not. There's an impact on buildability, there's an impact on compatibility of systems and materials and services, and particularly on thermal detailing, a misunderstanding of that. And I'll take you through some examples where insulation's impossible to fit, and various others. And I'll just give you this one, because it is one that interests me probably the most, having been on the practical side of delivering buildings for many years. The team were on site, and they were looking at this particular pier between two doors, and there was the pier, it was clear that the insulation was just missing, and the bricklayer came over and he said, you're wondering where the insulation is, aren't you? And the guys, the inspection team said, yeah, well, where is the insulation? Why hasn't you put it in? He said, well, you have a choice. You either have wall ties or you have insulation. Which do you want? He said, I made a decision to put in the wall ties to keep it structurally sound, but I can't get the insulation in as well. And that was the sort of practical examples that we came across so many times during the inspections. What about the issue about those SAP assessors' competency? Well, we found that there were problems with the accuracy of the inputs. People weren't following the conventions, they weren't validating the assumptions, and they certainly weren't producing anything that was remotely like an as-built SAP. When we do actually U-value calculations, do we understand what a U-value is even? I don't think many of our profession actually understand some of this stuff. And when we see a typical example like this, where we have a design for a roof insulation, half a metre thick, and you have a particularly low pitch, by the time you get to the perimeter and it's a detached building, you'll find that the insulation is diminished dramatically. And you often, I can't actually point, I have got a pointer here, but at the perimeter of the ceiling to the wall, we often get mold growth. We often get this sort of black line. Well, that's because it's a cold spot. We're getting a cold bridge, and we need to understand this stuff much more. But we don't. We just apply the same basic criteria. 25 quid for my SAP assessment is all going to be 500 thick right across the whole area, and that's what I'm going to put in. What about the lack of team, energy, performance, and related knowledge and skills and or care? BRE report some years ago now said the reason we don't get it right on site is people don't care. I won't swear today, but I was going to come up with a very strong adjective to describe what I think about that, because actually people do care. I honestly believe they do, but the lack of proper training of the workforce resulting in some significant construction faults, unplanned design solutions, and wrong system commissioning. And that was from Dr. Brooks as part of the Innovate UK's performance gap work. An absolute classic statement, lack of proper training for the workforce. When you're a bricklayer at the age of 16, you do your apprenticeship. You never go back and get retrained, never of the whole of your career. You just get trained the once, and that's it. So you never get updated with new information. So when we started to talk to the guys on site about why it was wrong, they said, oh, we didn't know that. Oh, we'll change it then. We'll do it right next time. Didn't take long to start to improve the performance of the individuals concerned. What we did find, though, is one of the most fascinating things for me was that we never found one window in the right place. At all 21 sites, all 200 units visited, there wasn't one window in the right place. Now, that has got to be a world record, surely. That's serious, though, because it creates this massive design fault and obviously a massive performance gap. When I raised this with the top 3 house builder, and I said, look, your windows are all in the wrong place, he went back to the manufacturer, and they changed by putting an extra stop on the former. They changed the design, and overnight, they all go in the right place. It didn't take long to fix it. It's just that people weren't aware that it was wrong. What about my favorite one, about the pound shop and the sticky tape and all of this sort of stuff? Well, product substitutions rampant on most building sites, mostly for cost-driven reasons. But the most striking observation about the application of materials and components were the number of occasions on which materials intended for one location were found in another, which goes back to the building I built, and unfortunately had blocks all over in the wrong places. So what did we end up saying? Well, we actually ended up saying a lot about what industry should do. We need to get better at our R&D, and we're delighted to be continuing to work with Innovate UK to see how we can do that. There's also about 73 billion euros available from Europe through one of their calls for taking things forward, and 63 billion of that is on the performance gap. So we're hoping that Europe's going to at least show some interest in finding the solutions as well as the UK. Skills and knowledge, massive. Construction detail scheme, we definitely need to get better at construction detailing, and we need to gather more evidence. But we didn't actually leave it there. We actually had a very good minister at the time, Don Foster, who worked very closely with. We also dealt with a guy called Stephen Williams as well on this. And we said to him, what are you going to do, government? Back to my mammoth at the beginning. What are you going to do, government, to sort this problem out? And I said, you've got to give a signal, a clear direction that we must address the problem. I just wish we had the Volkswagen issue then, because it would have made probably a bit more of an impact. We also need to stimulate industry investment, strengthen compliance regime, and support the skills and knowledge development. It goes back to those 4 critical criteria. And I can say, I don't care what I say, you probably noticed already, government, what have you done so far? Nothing. Nothing at all. We're still waiting for a statement. Although I have written to the Ministers Amber Rudd and with Friday it sent off Friday to also to Greg Clark, saying we want to meet you because this isn't happening. We haven't got long. We've only got till 2020. What I said to the ministers before when we had this project, give the industry time. Give them till 2020 to put their house in order. That means the chief executive of the manufacturer who claims 20% of poor performance, he knows it, 20%. Give him time to fix his products, get them to be delivering what it says on the tin. And many others, we just get them 2020. But government have got to signal something first to stimulate the investment from industry. So what's the hub doing? Well, we're going to address the performance gap in many ways, and I'm taking this right the way down to baseline here on this. So we actually created something called the Builder's Book, and many of you may have had a chance to pick one up just now, to provide a good practice guide in simple and clear format. And if any of you have got them, if anyone picked one up so far, maybe 1 or 2 if you have, you'll find that they're very simple. They're designed to be torn out, by the way. They've got a perforated page. So you can give it to tradesmen and say, this is how you do it. For the first time, something we can give the industry that actually helps them. When I introduced this to the managing director of Bellways a few weeks ago, he said, Rob, how many can I order? Can I order a couple of thousand? I said, we probably need about 10,000 for your company, but we won't go into detail. But we do need to understand really seriously how we're going to address the individuals on site and try to help them perform better. And this has gone down very, very well. As we did produce about 9,500 of these, and we're on, I think, on our third reprint. So they're very, very popular. They're just clear, they're simple, they're just basic, but they actually provide people with information. It's one of a series. You may also see today, which I think this is the day we're actually launching it. Actually, I should mention that. Thermal bridging. Anyone any good at thermal bridging? Anyone understand it? Well, if you do, please tell us, because no one else understands it, and we've had a real good go at trying to understand it ourselves and put it into a document that you can read. So in your pack, you should have this. Tell us what you think of it. If it needs to be revised or improved, or we'll be glad to hear your feedback. I'm running out of time, guys, but I just want to mention a couple of other things. Not just thermal bridging, not just build this book, we're going to do SAP Untangled. It was called SAP for Simpletons, but my board of directors said, Rob, that's probably pushing it a bit too far. Just keep it for SAP Untangled, and we'll go along with that. SAP design guides are going to be produced as well, a cost and efficiency handbook, a services simplified guide, already eco-bill for those who are attending. Just one or two slides on the future to finish off on the performance gap. What about overheating? Do we understand it? Government's beginning to panic. Government's given us 2 commissions this last few months on overheating. I know many of you are involved in that subject here, but there's a performance gap. If we're designing buildings today to last 100 years and they're not ready for the future, and Mike's already mentioned this, then we have a problem. So please get involved with our overheating work. It's really, really important. But I am beginning to see government just getting very twitchy about this. We've got the Environmental Agency, Public Health England, that also does Wales as well, by the way, but they don't get mentioned. I live in Wales. I've got a slight bias. Really interested in overheating. Last slide, interesting time for new build. We've seen the lightning strike on the zero carbon policy. We've obviously seen the horizon, which says we have a nearly zero energy building coming up, and that's the definition. So 2021, January the 1st, all our buildings will be working to the new definition, European definition, if we're still in Europe. That's all from me. Hope you found that interesting. I think we're going to have a question and answer session now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rob. Yeah, we've got a few minutes now for questions and answers. Just before we do that, I just need to make a quick announcement, if I could, please. The CIBSE School Design Group, who are having their AGM, I think, will be meeting at 12 o'clock to 12:30 and not 11 that you may be expecting. So my apologies if that's news to you. But apparently you will now be meeting from 12 to 12:30, enjoying the first hour of your lunch during that session. So if you could remain in the room, please, that would be much appreciated. I think we've got people with microphones throughout the space. We just have about 6 or 7 minutes for questions to Simon and Rob. So I wonder if I could invite the first of those questions, please. Paul.
Bob Lowe, by the way, Energy Institute. Are we on? Yep. Okay. Bob Lowe, UCL Energy Institute. Great presentation, Rob. Really enjoyed it. 2 things. Secret knowledge. One of the things that causes secret knowledge is research funding, which connects things like building performance evaluation to directly to construction companies who have the ability to stall on the release into the public domain of information that the public has paid for. And it seems to me that that might be something that we can address. And perhaps if you could comment on that in a moment. The second thing I wanted to say is regarding training. You put an awful lot of stuff down to training. I'm not sure that's the whole of the picture. I suspect that incentive structures, in particular the use of piecework, payment for piecework, and the multiple levels of contracting and subcontracting with the industry may also be part of the problem. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Thanks, Bob. I think the issue about time-driven performance, trying to deliver something within a particular time period is a challenge. I do think we should tackle skills and training first, and then tackle the way we deliver it second. I don't think the knowledge is there in the first place. So I think we need to get the knowledge in place and then tackle the issues about trying to do it quickly. But I think it's an interesting one. We didn't spend a lot of time measuring people's attitudes to doing it quickly. We'd asked them, do you know how to do it? And they didn't know how to do it. So we wanted to start there first. I think the next step would be, once they know how to do it, then if they're still getting it wrong, then it would be to say, well, what's the secondary cause? And that would certainly be one of the issues would be, you're just rushing it, guys. You're not paying attention to detail. So I think it would be knowledge first, and then why is it still going wrong? I don't disagree with you. I think there is an issue there. Yeah, that's frustrating as hell. That is really frustrating. Matt, do you want to come on to answer that for me?
Yes, Matt Colmer from, formerly Innovate UK, now working with the Zero Carbon Hub and the Digital Catapult. We'll be addressing secret knowledge later on, but I totally understand that these things get locked away because of proprietary information and being able to identify manufacturers and indeed individual people, which is a big challenge. So what we're aiming to do with the Catapult, and I have 20 minutes to talk about it later on, is to neutrally convene that information so that we cannot access the data-sensitive information, but we can still release information which is quite, we have the ability to open up by an anonymized fashion. So I will be covering that a bit later on this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? We've got time to fit.
Thank you. John Davies. A question for Rob, really. You talked about the useful guides, and I have seen them. This is the Builder's Book, etc. But the one person missing from all this seems to be the poor end consumer, who's the guy who's sold the dodgy VW diesel or the dodgy house. And I just wonder whether there's any mileage, or you've got any comments really on giving poor consumers information. You know, as an example, you move into a new house and you've got a howling gale through the windows. Builder says, oh, well, it's built to building regs, building control have seen it, that's fine. Consumer doesn't think it's fine. Just interested in whether there could be a guide for the innocent consumer.
That's an excellent question. And when we were asked by government to look at the performance gap, I sort of looked at the bandwidth of it and thought, well, we'd love to tackle the consumer end, but we're going to stop at the what is your building delivering at point of the end of the construction phase before the occupant even starts using it. We thought it was another world of pain. If we'd had a second bite at this, we would have said, right, what actually happens when the occupant moves in? Do they actually fit to the models that are built into SAP and other calculation tools? But interestingly, the Hub team submitted a paper to the government inquiry, which is going on into the quality of housing. There's a I don't know how many of you know this, but there's actually a government inquiry into the quality of the built environment, particularly on housing. And we presented to the select committee. It wasn't televised, so it was luckily my face wasn't on TV. But I actually did present, and actually we actually tackled performance gap and said, as a select committee, you used the word quality. Actually, it's not about quality, it's about performance. You've got the wrong title. And that was like, oh, what do you mean, Rob? So I explained, this is about the performance of the building, not about the quality. I've got gold taps in my bathroom, but they drip. But I've got a rusty one outside, never drips. Which one's the best? Well, my dripping one inside is definitely not good quality. But we got it performance-wise, the one outside it's performing brilliantly. It doesn't drip. That's what I want. You're dead right. We need to address it. What I've heard a little bit on the inside track, they haven't actually released the findings of this select committee inquiry, but they are going to have some kind of ombudsman to actually get some feedback, because they've got nowhere to go. If someone says the howling gale through the windows, then and he says I built the building regs, then there's nowhere for that purchaser to go at all, and that's really sad. So we do need to address that. So a very good question.
Thank you. It's actually 11 o'clock now, so unfortunately we do have to move on. Can I encourage you to, if you do have any questions for the speakers, then to catch them over lunch. I'm sure they'll be both delighted to speak to you then.